YMCA in Seattle, so I got my high school diploma.
You got your college degree first and then your high school diploma next.
Yeah.
Gee.
That's funny, that's amazing. You had to be so tenacious to get that.
Yeah.
Well, the
Now,
well, that's
when you,
another.
when you went to school, when you were still living in Wallace, how did you get to school? Did you walk to school?
Oh, yeah. Everybody walked. There weren't any cars.
There were no cars in town at all?
Oh, yeah, there were cars, but not many. But, you know, cars were very rare in those days, and my father was very venturesome. So he was one of the few men who went out and bought a car about 1920. And his was a Maxwell that you never hear of anymore, a Maxwell touring car. It had no windows in it, but if we were, it was just a framework. And if we were out in the rain, I can remember him pulling over to the side of the road and attaching this kind of a plexiglass.
Isinglass.
I guess that's what it is, isinglass, with screws. There were screws that they could screw those in place so that the rain wouldn't come in. And my mother was a very saving Scotch person, and she sewed all our clothes and did canning. She did everything to be thrifty. So she was saving money for years to buy a home, because they had a rented home, you know, and she was saving money. And he took the money and he soaked it in on this car. And
That didn't go over too well.
and that didn't go over so well, and she wouldn't ride in it for a week or two, you know. She,
Took her a little while to warm up to that idea.
How did he get her to do that?
well,
You
he
know?
started giving everybody in the neighborhood rides. I can remember that way back in the 1920, you know, he was inviting different neighbors to come in and ride in the car. And so finally she got over that, and so she let the children and let the rest of us all go, and I can remember him going out and going to church in that car, and you know, going for rides. I can remember the three of us would be sitting in the back seat. Sometimes we'd be quarreling, and my dad would reach way back and
Swat one of you.
well,
What was the? Let me just get a couple of facts here.
my dad was
Here, Mom.
tall, very good build. He had about 6'2". He had kind of blonde brown hair, a slight wave in his hair. He was very handsome.
Is that where you got your wave?
I guess so. Although my mother's hair was naturally curly too, and she was shorter and small, and she was very attractive too.
Well, Amby had curly hair too.
His was just kinky.
Who's
Yeah.
Amby?
Are you talking about him being kinky? My God.
Now, Billy, this is for posterity's sake.
Yeah, well, he had very pretty hair.
Who is
His
that?
hair, that's my brother,
Okay, which
See,
brother
there-
was this?
Ambrose.
The only one.
Ambrose McDonald.
Charles
Ambrose
McDonald.
Charles McDonald.
Uh-huh.
And then you had a sister too?
Anne.
Anne.
Anne Cecilia.
Okay.
And my second name is Sadie. I never cared for my name.
Sadie.
Sadie.
How do you spell that?
Sadie.
Sadie.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll have to start calling you that from now on. Mommy Sadie.
I wouldn't like that.
All right, we won't. All right, let's see. Now go back even further. Let's see. What's your father's full name again?
Daniel Charles.
MacDonald.
McDonald.
M-A-C?
Uh-huh.
Is that the Scottish way?
It's MC.
Oh, MC.
MC, D-O-N-E-L-L. In fact,
McDonald.
my cousin who has come down here from Toronto, he came here to visit all of us. And he came over to Seattle, he came to Idaho, and then he came over to Seattle.
Recently?
Well, he came to see the Delaney's, all of them. It's been 2 or 3 times, hasn't it? And he pronounced the name McDonnell.
McDonnell.
McDonnell, yeah.
Okay.
That's why he said that up in Greenfield, Ontario, half the people were McDonald's.
I got you.
We always said McDonald, but he always called it McDonnell.
And now this was your first cousin?
See, I believe so. I believe he
Okay.
was my first cousin, and he would be Joyce's
All right, well,
second cousin.
Who were your grandparents?
McPhee's.
M-C-F-E-E?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Is that Irish or Scottish, or what is that?
I think that's Scotch.
Scotch.
McPhee's?
McPhee.
No, on which side?
That would be on my father's side.
And your mom's side?
My mom, they spelled her name M-A-C-D-O-N-A-L-D.
Just like the restaurants?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
No,
Okay.
what he's saying is your grandparents on your mom's side. Who were they?
That would be MacDonald.
MacDonnell.
McDonald.
M-A-C-D-O-N-A-L-D.
Okay.
So there wasn't very much of a change.
On your mom's side?
Yeah.
And your dad,
And my
his
dad,
name was
my
McDonald.
dad, McDonnell. Uh-huh.
Huh.
See, one was McDonald and the other was McDonnell.
Okay. And your mom's full name was what?
Mary Elizabeth.
McDonald.
Mhm.
And when was she born? Do you remember?
It was 1883.
Okay.
And
And her parents were born when?
I don't remember when.
What were their
when
names?
Her parents.
What were your...
Her parents' names. There was Bill and
Bill McDonald.
Bill McDonnell, and then there was the priest. They called him Archibald, and
That was an uncle.
and Cecilia, and Sarah.
These are your aunts and uncles?
Mm-hmm.
But who's your grandmother?
Susan McPhee.
McPhee.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Did she come over from the old country?
I think so. Yeah.
And they moved to Canada, right?
Yes.
One of
uh-huh.
them.
Mhm.
You know-
And then your grandfather also came from Scotland and moved to Canada, and that's where
yes,
they met and married.
Yeah. And I think they were right around there in Ontario.
So your grandparents met and married in Canada, but they came over from Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know very much about them? Did your mom ever?
No, like I
Talk
was
about
telling Charlie, I said, when Charlie, my cousin, you were there,
Yeah.
I was telling him that we just didn't have the money to travel.
Yeah, but I mean, did your mom ever talk about her parents much?
Mhm.
That's what we're
Yeah,
trying to
she
find
talked-
out.
Yeah, she talked about the.
Because you never said, talked too much about it, Mom.
Well, my mother never talked about the past very much to us.
Yeah.
So we didn't learn very much about them. And in fact, they never came, they never came to see us, and we certainly didn't have the money. She was raising us, and we didn't have the money to go clear to eastern Canada, you know,
Yeah.
to go and,
So your
and-
mother's
and
parents-
visit them.
Your mother's parents lived in Eastern Canada?
Well, it wasn't extremely east. Let's see now,
In the Toronto area.
there is BC, the British Columbia, and then there is the province of, what province is Calgary and,
That's right above Montana.
Okay.
then, I don't know, that wouldn't be Alberta, would it? Or
It could
would it be
be.
Saskatchewan?
Could be,
Saskatchewan, I think.
Saskatchewan, and then there's Alberta. When I was about 3 months old, my parents went to Edmonton, Alberta, and took me, and they thought that they would go farming for a while, and they were there. They bought some land, and they were there only about 3 months, and then they returned back to Idaho. I remember that about Alberta. But Ontario, I think, was a province that was next to Alberta. And that was, so that wasn't really extremely east
But you didn't-
in Canada. That was more like central Canada.
But it was still too far to really get to see them
Oh,
much.
yes.
How many
Yeah.
times did you meet your grandparents?
There was not the travel then that there
Right.
is now. Not many people had cars, and they didn't fly at all. And then very few went on the train. So we never went to see them, and they never came to see us.
Can you
Although-
remember ever meeting them?
But, well, I remember meeting a second cousin. It was the first cousin of my father's. And this was Cassie McClellan. And she was from Squamish, BC, which is north of Vancouver, BC. And she was a first cousin of my father's. And she was married, living there with her husband. They had no children. And this was between, Squamish is between Vancouver and Whistler's Mountain, you know, that popular ski resort there up north of Vancouver.
Uh-huh.
And so she came and she stayed at our house about 3 months to be with my mother while my father was so sick. And so they took care of him in our home. Those days, there were not many people going to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You see, we're really antiquated. We're pioneers. We did everything the hard way.
What got your family to Idaho?
Was the mining.
Oh, okay.
Was the mining. I guess that he had some mining experience from Canada. There were some mines there in Ontario, although I think there's mostly farming there.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
there's
that'd be-
also mining there in Alberta too. So there was not very much travel, you know, and we always appreciated my Cassie coming from Vancouver, or north of Vancouver, to be with all of us, you know, at the time my father died.
Right.
And they took care of him right there. They turned the living room into a hospital room and took care of him. And so we all just lived in the kitchen. We had a second floor and we had bedrooms upstairs, but we all stayed in the kitchen all the time because that was where he was being taken care of.
I see. did you correspond much with your, or did your mother correspond with her parents much or anything?
They would send notes at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
They sent notes at Christmas time.
Okay.
And then I remember my mother always getting a nice letter from Father Archie. I can remember that.
That would be her brother.
But you know, Charlie, who came to visit all of us, he did say regretfully that he wished that we had gotten together 50 years ago. You know, that he was sorry that they never were able to come down and meet us and to get together at that time, but everybody was busy living their own life.
And this was during the Depression too, right? A lot of that time.
Well,
Was this before the Depression?
It was, yeah, it was before the Depression, because I remember that when I was going to high school, Ann and I used to babysit as much as we could. And actually, when I went in training, it was 1928, and the Depression didn't, it started then in 1928, but it really didn't crash until October 1929. You see, I got my figures. I just got...
That's a rather memorable date, though, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I just got through listening to this wonderful documentary on... they showed 10 hours of the history of New York from the beginning, from the time it was New Amsterdam.
How about,
Henry Hudson discovered the Hudson.
how about Dad, on Dad's side now? Did you know very much about his parents and grandparents and his grandparents? Did you ever meet him?
No.
You never met his parents?
How old was he when he married you?
Oh, you mean your dad?
Oh, no, not when he married you, but yeah. No.
You mean
your
my
your
husband?
parents. Your parents. How old were your parents when they got married? Do you know?
My parents, let's say now, my mother was born in 1883. I think my dad was probably around about 1882. I think he was just about a year older than she was.
And about when did they get married?
Well, let's see, about 1909.
Okay. All right. And so had they been living away from home when they got married?
She went when she left. She was quite young. Charlie remembers. She was quite young, and she learned to be a millinerist and a dressmaker. And she went to Michigan, and she went to Wisconsin and Minneapolis, and she went to visit relatives over there because she talked about some cousins over there.
And supported herself as a dressmaker?
Mm-hmm.
I see. And that's when she met your father.
She knew my father when they were growing up. They were growing up. Only they had farms. They lived on farms just a short distance from one another. Charlie said that was true. So when they were young, you know, when they were teenagers, they knew one another. The families knew one another when they were growing up, and so then I can remember some distant cousins coming to our house in Idaho, Mullen, Idaho, when I was growing up. Let's see. they were from Wisconsin. And I remember in them talking, she left there and then she went down to San Francisco. And she went there, I think it was about a year after the earthquake there.
So that would have been 1909.
Hmm. I think that was about the year that she went. And so my dad heard that she was down there. You know, I suppose he'd hear from relatives. They heard that she was down there. But she was, I guess she had kind of the wanderlust. She liked travel. So he followed her down there, down to San Francisco, and they were married there.
In San Francisco?
Hmm. And then I was born in Spokane, because they lived there in Spokane a short time. So I was born in Spokane, Washington.
How old were you at that time? Just kidding.
I probably was just a few months old
Did-
when we left there.
Uh-huh.
And we left there and then went to Idaho.
Didn't your mom used to work for Frederick and Nelson's at their house or something?
There in Seattle. That was during the war. Yeah, that was with the
Which war?
With the
World War
World War II. She lived in a mansion down in what they call the Highlands.
What was your dad doing?
He was long gone by that time.
Oh, was he?
Because when we moved to Seattle then in 41, I think she came to Seattle around about 42 or 43, because she was.
You had left the house then, by then.
Huh?
You were gone by then. I mean, you were married.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she went on.
I had.
Well, did she have the two
I had
kids
the two
with her?
girls. I had the two girls, because she
Did she
came,
go by herself then?
She came to Seattle to live about a year or 2 years before you were born.
Yeah.
You were born in 1944. So is it all mixed up now?
A little bit. I'm not clear here. Did your dad stay with her and go with her there or not?
No. He was already dead.
Oh, okay. That was after your father died. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
back.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, because he
Right.
died. He died in 1924.
1924. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, what about your dad's parents? We don't know much about them, since I don't. Where are they from?
I have some material that's written.
I mean, my dad's parents.
Oh,
Your-
your dad's parents.
Yeah.
That would be your parents-in-law.
Your
Your in-laws.
The Romischers.
yeah, the Romischers. Uh-huh.
The black
was-
sheep of the family.
Well, Michael Romischer, your grandpa, that would be your grandpa.
Yeah. My dad's dad.
He was, I believe, from Bavaria, Germany.
So he's first generation.
Yeah,
Sure.
he's the first American
Okay.
generation. He came as a young man from Bavaria.
About what year?
It was before World War II, because he came over here and
Probably World War One.
he went, that's right, it was before World War I.
Yeah.
And he went to St. Louis, Missouri, and joined the cavalry, and became an American citizen. And so he was, the way I understand it, he was in the cavalry against the Germans in World War One.
Okay, what was his name now?
Michael?
Michael Romischer.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And did he marry in St. Louis?
Yes. He and Johanna Cousin married there in St. Louis. That's the way I understand it.
Just like Mr. and Mrs. Richard P. Delaney, right?
Now, what church does he
And
do?
the way I understand it was that they're at the big cathedral, the old cathedral. And wasn't that the church where you and Joyce were married?
We were married in the St. Louis University Church, St. Francis Xavier. And I thought that they had been married in that church too. It was a big, beautiful church, but it wasn't the old cathedral. There is a church in St. Louis called the Old Cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've been operating under a delusion for many years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now,
So,
go on with them.
then they,
She was from Ireland.
she was from a suburb of Dublin, and they call this suburb Black Rock Castle. They called many of the small towns after the castles that were there, you know, because that was the most prominent building there in this area. And so they called many of the towns after the castles. And,
Where, you mean in Bavaria?
no,
No,
they're
Ireland.
in
Oh, in Ireland.
suburb of
Are you asleep?
Ireland.
I see.
Not yet.
Uh-huh.
I think
Yeah.
Dick's gonna fall asleep.
All right,
there.
well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you very much. We better stop it now. We're going to have to finish this up later because it's getting late and you guys have to get home.
Okay.
All right, but
Okay.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Is it still going?
We got it on tape. Oh, we got it all going. Oh, yeah. Let's see.